Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here is your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today, our guest is Ms. Sue Bowles. Did I say your name correct?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. I was like, oh man, that's a rough start when you don't say the name right. I usually ask people before I hit the record button. Sue is an author, speaker, and a mastered certified life coach. And she leads an organization called My Step Ahead. Welcome, Sue. Please tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Karen. Wow, I don't even know where to start. What you said is pretty much tells you what I'm doing right now. My main purpose is just to be a voice of hope. I want to be a voice of hope to people who are trying to deal with things that maybe they haven't had to deal with before, or realizing that they deserve better, and maybe they're feeling stuck. Maybe they're not sure how to take that next step ahead, and I want to be a voice of help to help them with that.
Okay, awesome. Can you tell us about a time that you were stuck and how that happened?
Yeah, and before we get started, let me give a quick trigger warning. A couple of things I'm about ready to share are pretty intense. And we're going to talk about some sexual assault. We're going to talk about eating disorders. So if any of those are triggers for you or anything like that, I really encourage you to maybe push pause and engage in some self-care, come up with a plan. And when you're ready, come back. The recording will be waiting for you. Your self-care is most important in this. So I always want to do that first.
I really appreciate that. I really do, because pushing that pause and getting yourself like your favorite blanket or a cup of herbal tea, do something to soothe yourself is super important. So thank you for that.
Oh, not a problem. So having said that and given the opportunity for people to take a break, my story when I got stuck, I was 7 years old because I was raped as a classmate when I was 7 years old in first grade. Raped me. And my emotions became frozen in time on that day. And they stayed frozen until my senior year of college when I finally told somebody. It became a 15-year secret. The way I phrase it is anytime when you have longer something's in the freezer, the thicker the ice becomes. So my emotions were in the freezer for 15 years. Very critical growth years, developmental years, all the way through middle school, high school. And because of that, my brain, as you know, trauma rewires your brain, and my brain was not processing things correctly. In college, it developed into an eating disorder. I've been suicidal twice. It wasn't until 2014 when I finally started getting unstuck myself, and I finally started dealing with it. And it is not a journey for the faint of heart, but I'm worth it. And I did the hard work, and now it's a joy to be on the other side and be able to encourage others who are maybe struggling. Maybe what they're stuck with isn't as severe as that, and maybe it is. Either way, I can encourage you and help them take their next step ahead.
Okay. So before we talk about your recovery, were there other instances of trauma in your life, whether physical, emotional, or sexual?
Yeah. There was emotional abuse when I was growing up. There was other sexual assault or sexual abuse from boys in high school and a neighborhood boy. So there are multiple traumas. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. My dad was an alcoholic. Now he's also 30 years in recovery and sober. So I'm dad blessed and proud of him.
Okay.
My folks divorced after 34 years of marriage. So I had all kinds of trauma going on, and I was trying to survive and did it the only way I knew how. And that led to me pretty much imploding or coming close to imploding and becoming very desperate until I finally took that step and reached out for help.
Okay. Can you tell us a little more about what imploding looked like for you? Because we know you didn't blow up into little pieces.
Right. Emotionally imploding. While I was hurting, I was dying on the inside emotionally. I was hurting. I had terrible self-esteem. I did not think I mattered. I thought that I was taking up space and that I was a burden. And the big thing was I felt like nobody cared. And these are the things I was telling myself. That led to me isolating, to withdrawing, to me going into depression, to being suicidal. And so it just started. It all started it started because I didn't tell somebody. And at that point, let me back up. I did nothing wrong the day Bobby raped me. It took a long time for me to be able to say that and to believe it. I firmly believe it now, but that was a critical point of starting to heal for me, was being able to say that. But having said that, Bobby's last words to me were, don't tell anybody. So I didn't know the power those were going to hold over me for so long. And that led to me isolating, to shutting down. I was shutting down emotionally, and yet anyone who experiences that, at the same time, it doesn't shut off anything. All it does is it stuffs, and it comes out in different ways. That's where my eating disorder came from. That's where the depression came from. I was an angry young girl, and someone, when I was in 8th grade, nailed it, and I didn't know it. In your class book, and your photo book, she wrote, to the girl who's always mad. And I remember, I'm like, what is that? And now I look back and it's like, man, Monica, you knew, you saw when I didn't, or I might have known, but I would punch boxes. I worked at a fast food restaurant. I go in the walk-in. If I was mad, I punched boxes. I punched lockers. I dented a locker in high school. I was not well. That's what imploding looked like for me, was acting out in other ways, because I wanted someone to know I was hurting, and I didn't know how to ask for it.
Right. So you showed it.
Mm-hmm.
You showed that you were hurting.
In all kinds of self-destructive ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important for other women to hear that, because sometimes they just think they do bad things because they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all the evidence, right?
Right.
And it's so unfortunate, because had the abuse not happened, their behavior would not look, they wouldn't need to act out so much, especially teenage girls.
Right.
It tends to be a thing, or the young 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that happened that led to your journey of healing, of recovery?
It was a conversation with my dean of students. I went to a small college in Northwest Ohio called Defiance College. Small college. And again, you got to imagine, 11 years in the freezer when you start college. My emotions were, I was not healthy. That's the best way to put it. And Ed Highland became my confidant. And he was somebody that I met with him pretty much every week. And we'd sit for a couple hours. By the time I got to my senior year of college, Ed took a new position, and we were still meeting. He said he'd still be available. And he started giving me some homework to do. And just, he kind of knew, I think, that I wasn't ready to go into the workforce, and was trying to help me get there. And we were discussing the homework he gave me. And I don't remember for the life of me what his question was. All I know is I went off on some kind of rambling tangent. And it ended with, well, when society tells you, and my voice trailed off. And Ed, bless his heart, had the courage. And he said, Sue, did somebody hurt you? Did your parents hurt you? And I said, no, not them. He said, somebody else? I said, yeah. He said, what happened? And I told him. And I didn't know any of this wanted to come out. I hadn't really been thinking about it. And it was not planned. And yet that was the first step. Because at that point in time, I could tell him. And he encouraged me to tell my counselor in town. I asked him to go with me that next time. I was still shadowboxing. Ed had to call me on it right there in front of my counselor. And then when I was in grade, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah. Hey, pause one second, Sue, because, we're in real life right now, and my son walked into the room. So I have to redirect him.
No problem.
1 second. Hey, Gideon Robinson. I need you to go upstairs for like 15, 20 minutes, please. We do things really raw around here. Raw. Hopefully my editor can edit it out, but if not, my audience already knows. It's like, what you see is what you get.
Hey, authenticity. That's great.
Okay, so now he's out there. I apologize.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah. Are you able to pick up where you left off? Okay.
I'm talking about Ed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He took you to a counseling session.
Yeah. So Ed called me on in my counseling session, and I finally told my counselor. I went to graduate school, and it was, I had just kind of come out about it into those terms, in terms of telling somebody, but I hadn't really started the healing journey. And it came out again in grad school. I talked to my supervisor about it. Probably within the first month or so of being there. I was graduate assistantship, and Amy was just fantastic. She helped me get over to the counseling center, went over with me, introduced me to the counselor, and encouraged me to come see her afterwards. And that is what started it.
Wow.
Even then, though, I mean, there's a lot of object lessons from that, but the real healing didn't start until about 2014, believe it or not.
No, I believe it. It's a process with lots of gaps usually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have to be really, really, really ready.
Yeah. And I think I was, but I wasn't, if that makes sense. And I think the biggest object lesson I learned from that was just the power of telling somebody, of taking that risk and trusting somebody. And just when you first share your story for the first time, it really starts crumbling all the cement you've built around your heart.
Yeah. Makes the secrets crumble too, the darkness.
It does. But then the challenge was that here I was with an eating disorder. And emotions are not the friends of someone with an eating disorder, because that's why you end up with an eating disorder, is because you don't want to deal with the emotions. So I had so much going on that when I first started dealing with it, I still didn't know how to deal with my emotions. So I was still pretty much shutting them off. It was more cerebral. And even then, it really, it was incomplete, obviously. So it really wasn't, again, until 2014, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute, where I really started being able to connect my head and my heart so I could find congruency again and finally start the real road of recovery.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you finally got on that road.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So much.
And you mentioned that you were an author in your bio.
Yes.
So
Yes.
is your writing anything to do with your recovery?
Yes, I have a book out here. I'll show it to you here. It's called This Much I Know, The Space Between. It's on Amazon and Kindle.
Oh,
And
awesome.
it came out in 2019. It is an award-winning book. It got second place nonfiction at the Faith and Fellowship Book Festival in 2020. So that's exciting. My first book self-published and it won an award. So I'm on the right track. So
That is awesome.
yeah, it's fun. But yeah, the book, the concept behind it, the book is my story. And it's also about the healing journey that I went on. The first half is This Much I Know, because this much I know is our story. Each one of us have a story, and it is the one thing we know and the one thing nobody can take from us.
That's
So
right.
this much I know is the story. And the second half is The Space Between, talks about the journey between being wounded and having scars, and the healing process that has to happen through that. Excuse me, because if you think about it, a wound is still bleeding. It's still an active trauma. It's still showing the signs of the injury. But when it becomes a scar, when it has healed and becomes a scar, it becomes a story of hope for somebody else. It becomes a story for somebody else to share what happened, but then they'll say, but I'm not there anymore. And for me, that's what the book is about, is that space between. Is about that journey to go from active trauma and an active wound that was still bleeding to now being able to be that voice of hope, because I've done the hard work of healing. You think about it, when you break a bone, that healing hurts. They put it in the cast and they mobilize it so that it can heal properly, but it still hurts. Healing is not painless. But when you get to the other side, you become fully functioning again.
You have no idea how much that resonates with me. I'm always talking about how it's important, or how ineffective it is just to throw a Band-Aid on something.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a large wound that's bleeding, a little Band-Aid's not really it's gonna get lost.
Right.
Taking that time to really, really heal those deep wounds.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And it takes a lot of people in your corner. And it's, like I said earlier, it's not something for the faint of heart, but it is certainly something worthwhile, because you are worthwhile.
Yes. I'm bummed I didn't read your book before having you on today. I usually try to do that. It's been a bit of a busy season for me.
Yeah, sure.
But I will definitely get on Amazon and order it. I'm excited.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I encourage the audience to also read it. reading about other people's healing journey is just super inspirational.
If I real quick, the first line in the book is they were hurt people hurting their kids. And that was a line I heard at a retreat I attended. And I go on to say that it doesn't justify anything that happened, but it helps me understand. And I think that's such a critical point for any of us, be it family situations or whatever. Hurt people hurt others. For me, and this is not the norm, for me, I have come to the point where I feel compassion for Bobby, the boy who raped me. And I say this, in the 70s, rape was not on the radar. It was not in the news or discussion or anything. It was safe to walk to school. Everybody in our neighborhood walked the half mile, 3/4 mile to school. It was no big deal. It was normal. So when it happened, I didn't know what happened. I didn't have the words, and I didn't know what to say, and no one knew to ask. So it was nobody else's fault but Bobby. But having said that, when I say they were people hurting their kids, I think of Bobby because it wasn't on the radar for my life. What was he exposed to or possibly even experiencing himself that made him act out that way? Now, not every personality it's not the norm for someone who has been raped to get to that point. And it actually wasn't even somewhere I was going until it was a discussion I had with my counselor many years down the road. But I'm to that point now, again, because of the hard work of healing. Ask me that in the middle of it, I was raging mad. So it's not for the faint of heart, but I do stand here as a voice of hope to again say it is possible.
It is possible. Yes. Thank you. Awesome message. So I also like to ask a few other things if it's okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm a big book nerd, and I think books in general are powerful healers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite book other than your own, of course?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. I would say one, for me, if it's a good book, if it's a hard read for me, because when I was going through my healing, that I knew it was speaking to me. And for me, one of them would have to be The Shack. And there was a movie out in the theaters called The Shack.
Yes.
The other one's a movie. It's a movie called Ragamuffin. There's books that are tied to that. But the movie in particular, and I think I resonate more to movies than books. The movie in particular for me was the catalyst to my healing because it's based on the life of Rich Mullins, who's a Christian musician, died in 1997. In fact, the anniversary is tomorrow, September 19th. And so they did a movie about Rich's life called Ragamuffin. And the movie talks about authentic living, taking off the masks that we wear that make people think we're someone that we're not. Talks about family relationships, reckless faith and living a life of reckless abandon to God, and just realizing that it's okay to be broken. And those are all things I was struggling with. I was tapped off of God. And I felt like I was a waste of time. That was what I felt like. So this movie came out, and about 6 months later, the family of Rich and then the movie producers decided to do a retreat. And when I talk about 2014, this is what I'm talking about, is that this retreat it's called Ragamuffin Retreat. It's now become Walking Stick Retreats. And that is where, for the first time, I started realizing I could be loved. One of the staff members has since said that it's as if that first retreat was kind of a Hail Mary pass for me. Could God really love me? And could I be loved by his kids? And I went into that retreat calling myself the holy exception, but believing that everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody else but me. I was too screwed up, too far gone, wasted time. And I left there able to say and starting to believe for the first time that Jesus Christ is absolutely crazy about me. God not only loves me, but he likes me. And that was this total, a total paradigm shift. And then my counselor and I sprung board off that. And that led into dealing with the rape in 2015. And then 2016, finally going into recovery for an eating disorder, having to deal with all the emotions that go with it. And that's when all the healing really started, was 2014. So it's really only been 7 years since all this has transformed for me. So I tend to relate more to movies than books, I think.
That's fine. Yeah. Because for visual learners. It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I never heard of the movie Ragamuffin, so guess what I'm watching tonight?
That'd be great. It can be a hard watch, depending on where people are coming from. First time I saw it, we had brought 10 people to watch it, and I was like my mom and friends from church, and I did a lot of the silent. I just got something in my eye. You know how that works, because it went back to what happened in my eating disorder, is that I had painted myself and set myself up and given the impression, I wore the mask and had people convinced, or so I thought, that Sue was okay, that Sue was strong, Sue had no problems, nothing bothers Sue. And how the eating disorder played out was that I would have enjoyed an extra helping of food. Very human need, natural need, needed, it kind of sustains life. But by then my brain was so warped out and it had not been getting the nutrition it needed to function properly, that I warped it out that everybody was looking at me. And what that meant was that if I went up to get more food, people were looking at me and they would know that Sue had a need. And God forbid anyone know that Sue was hurting and had a need, because then Sue would be found out. So I dumped my tray and got out of Dodge because I couldn't let on that I was hurting. And what I learned about myself, and a lot of this I learned as I wrote my book, was that activity became my number. Because if I stayed busy, I didn't have to think. And if I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. So it kind of, I've learned so much about myself, but all those things with the movie all tied into things that led to having to have the hard conversations, to go into recovery from an eating disorder, to have to then, that was the hardest part, was having to identify emotions and let myself feel them when, for 40, 50 years, I denied my story and my emotions. And so recovery and healing is not for the faint of heart, but it all started just because of a crazy 2-hour movie. So
well, now we know where it all started. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, anything else that you want to share with my audience about anything that could give them more hope?
Sure. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity, Karen. And for your listeners, for your audience, there are 2 messages I share. When I say I'm a voice of hope, I have 2 messages. And the first one is what I didn't believe for a long time, and now it's what I tout. It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to carry the weight of the world if there are people around who want to help. But as with me, until I took that first courageous and scary step of telling somebody and reaching out, you will stay stuck and it will only get worse. So my first message is that it's okay to not be okay. The second message goes with it, and it's the tagline for my step ahead, is that you only have to be a step ahead to help the person behind you. And I say that because a lot of times when we're struggling, we feel like we can't help anybody else because we're too screwed up. We have to have it all together before we can be used by anything or for anything, and that will be of any good to anybody. And that is a lie. And that's what I want to break down, that you only have to be a step ahead. I lost my mom October 5th, 2020, coming up on a year. I was her caregiver for the last 8 years of her life. She lived with me. And April of this year, a coworker tragically lost her father. And myself and the person went out to the house to just encourage her and see what we could do to help. And there was concern expressed for me going because it was still so raw. And I said, I guess we're going to find out how this goes, because I just really wanted to go see her. Well, it started with tears and hugs. By the end of the visit, this person was asking me questions about what was it like at the funeral home? What will they do? What do we have to do? What will they do? And all those things that I had only walked through 6 months ago.
That's right.
But I was a step ahead. I was a step ahead of her, and I could help her. So that's my 2 messages. I am a life coach. I'm a master certified life coach, and I specialize in helping people get unstuck. So I do offer a 15-minute free consultation. They can go to SueBowles.com and sign up for it there. I'll be in touch within 24 hours, 24 business hours, and get in touch with you and get something scheduled and see how I can help you, because you're worthy. There is hope, and you matter. And I want to help you reach your goals and your dreams just like others helped me.
Awesome. That was very inspiring. I might just call you.
You know my number.
Well, I thank you so much. I can't tell you how wonderful it is for our audience to hear voices of hope, because there's so much negativity in any trauma group that you go to online. There's a lot of negativity. And of course, we understand why, people are hurting, angry, upset. Um, but often there's not that voice of hope. It happens sometimes. Sometimes it gets drowned out. So we need more of you in the world.
Thanks. I have teamed with there's an organization in Newark, Ohio called Healing Our Warriors, and they do a monthly mission, one-day mission. It's no charge. You can go to healingourwarriors.org, and it is there to help people who are dealing with anxiety, PTSD, depression, suicidal ideation, extreme stress, anything like anxiety, to give them tools to help them start taking their next step ahead. And then what I've come in to offer is a month of follow-up coaching with the participants, just to help take those tools and start putting muscle to them. So that, for the first month afterwards. In fact, today's the 18th September. They're having they're doing the mission today, but they can go to that website. Those are free. There's somebody from, I think we had New York in July. I think there's somebody from Florida there today. So they're coming from all over the country for this. So that's, might be a resource for your listeners as well.
Can you say the website one more time?
Healingourwarriors.org.
Okay. And it's not just for military members?
No, it's for anyone, because the concept is everyone has a warrior inside.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And everyone, can you tell the name of your book one more time for people?
Sure. It's called This Much I Know, The Space Between.
All right. Thank you again, Sue.
All right, great. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.